Have you ever felt truly alone, only to realize you weren't? Imagine walking along a stretch of forgotten railway tracks, where silence isn't peaceful, it's warning you. The air feels heavy, the darkness almost alive. What if something or someone still walks those tracks at night? Something that isn't supposed to exist anymore. Tonight, we're diving into a chilling, true-style encounter, the shadow on the old train tracks. Make sure you keep your lights on and your doors locked. It was late autumn in the small, forgotten town of Harrowdale, tucked deep in the countryside of northern England. The kind of place where fog lingered for days and the smell of damp earth never really left the air. The town was quiet now, too quiet, after the old railway line had been shut down almost 30 years ago. That's where Elias Rowan, a freelance photographer from London, found himself one chilly October evening. He wasn't from around here, but he had come chasing a story. An old rumor whispered online about the Harrowdale tracks, where locals claimed to see shadows that moved against the light. Some said they belonged to the spirits of those who died when the train derailed in 1973. Others didn't say anything at all. Elias didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in atmosphere, in the way an abandoned place could tell a story without words. With his camera slung around his neck and a flashlight in hand, he followed the path that led down to the forgotten railway line. The woods were thick on either side, branches reaching over the trail like blackened fingers. The air grew colder as he descended, his breath forming small white clouds that hung in front of him before fading into the mist. The faint crunch of gravel under his boots was the only sound. When he reached the old tracks, he paused. The rails were rusty, half buried under weeds and moss. The wooden planks creaked slightly when he stepped onto them. The smell of iron and wet leaves mixed together, and somewhere in the distance, he thought he heard the faint, metallic echo of something dragging. He turned his flashlight in that direction. Nothing, just fog and darkness stretching ahead. Elias raised his camera and snapped a few shots, the flash slicing through the mist for a split second. He checked the screen. Just fog, trees, and the faint line of the rails disappearing into the distance. Still, something about the photos made him uneasy. The shadows in the background, they didn't look natural. He decided to move further down the track. The deeper he went, the quieter it became. Even the insects had gone silent. The world around him felt frozen, as if time itself had stopped here. Then, just ahead, maybe 50 feet away, he saw it. A shape, something standing on the tracks. He froze, his flashlight trembling slightly in his grip. The figure didn't move. It wasn't solid, not really. It looked more like a patch of darkness, thicker than the night around it, like a shadow without a body. Elias blinked, thinking maybe it was his eyes playing tricks. But when he adjusted the light, the shape turned its head, and he swore, just for a moment, he saw two faint, glowing eyes staring back at him. His stomach dropped. The air around him felt heavier, like the oxygen had been sucked out. He took a slow step back, his boots crunching on the gravel. The sound echoed unnaturally, as if the space around him had stretched wider than it should be. Then the shadow moved. It didn't walk. It slid, smooth, silent, gliding across the tracks. And as it did, Elias felt the cold rush over him like an invisible wave. His breath came out in sharp, shaky gasps. He turned around and started walking back the way he came. Not running, not yet, but the deeper fear inside him was growing fast. He could feel it behind him. The sound of something soft brushing against the gravel followed him. He didn't dare look back, but when his camera, hanging loosely around his neck, suddenly clicked by itself, taking a photo, Elias finally turned. The shadow was right behind him, and this time it smiled. Elias stumbled backward, his flashlight flickering violently, as if reacting to the presence before him. That thing stood motionless, still shaped like a man but wrong in every way. Its edges blurred, its outline shifting, like smoke trapped inside glass. And that smile, faint, impossible, but definitely there, stretched across the darkness like a cut in the night. He turned and ran. The sound of his boots slamming the gravel echoed endlessly, bouncing off the trees. The tracks seemed longer now, stretching far beyond where he remembered. The mist thickened, wrapping around him like a living thing. His flashlight finally gave up, the beam dying, and he was swallowed by darkness. For a few seconds, there was only the sound of his breathing, heavy, ragged. Then, from behind him, came the unmistakable clang of metal, like something striking the old rails. Once, then again, clang, clang, slow, rhythmic, getting closer. He broke through the trees, heart pounding, until he reached the dirt road that led back toward Harrowdale. The fog here was thinner. He could finally see the faint glow of the town's streetlights in the distance. But even from here, he could still feel the shadow watching him. When he reached his car, he slammed the door shut and locked it. His hands shook as he started the engine. The headlights illuminated the old railway crossing sign, tilted and rusted, the words barely legible. Caution, no trains beyond this point. He laughed nervously to himself. Yeah, no kidding, he muttered. But his voice sounded weak, far away. Then he noticed something that froze him. On his windshield, right in the middle, were wet handprints. 2 of them, one on each side, as if someone or something had leaned over the hood, watching him through the glass. Elias wiped them away with his sleeve, but the moisture felt icy cold, colder than the air around him. He didn't wait. He hit the gas and drove straight back into town, not stopping until he reached the small bed and breakfast where he was staying. The innkeeper, a gray-haired woman named Martha Greaves, was standing at the front desk when he entered. She looked up from her book and frowned. "Good heavens, you look pale. You all right, love?" she asked, her accent soft but concerned. Elias hesitated. "I just went down to the old railway," he said. "Wanted to get a few photos." Her expression changed instantly. The warmth in her eyes vanished, replaced by something cold and wary. "You shouldn't have gone there," she said quietly. Elias frowned. "Why? It's just abandoned tracks." Martha shook her head slowly. "No, not just tracks. That line was cursed long before it was shut down. You've seen something, haven't you?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. His silence told her everything. Martha sighed and walked to a small shelf behind the counter. She pulled down an old, leather-bound book and laid it on the desk. The cover was cracked, the title worn away. She opened it to a yellowed newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Harrowdale Train Disaster. Dozens Dead in Mysterious Crash." Elias leaned closer. The photo showed twisted metal, smoke, and scattered debris. But what caught his eye was the faint, dark blur in the corner, almost human-shaped. "That," Martha said, pointing to it, "is why no one goes down there anymore. The train derailed late one foggy night. Some say the engineer saw someone, or something, standing on the tracks before the crash. But there was never anybody found. Only shadows." Elias swallowed hard. "So you're saying that thing I saw, it's the same one?" Martha met his gaze. "People say the tracks remember what happened, and sometimes they make you see it again." He tried to laugh it off, but inside, he felt that same chill spreading again, deep in his chest, wrapping around his lungs. He looked down at his camera, still hanging from his neck, and realized he hadn't checked the last photo it took, the one that clicked by itself. He switched it on. The small screen flickered. The image loaded slowly. At first, it was just a blur, too dark to make out. But when he adjusted the brightness, his blood ran cold. In the photo, he could see himself standing on the tracks. But behind him, inches away, was that shadow. And this time, it wasn't just smiling. It was reaching out. His hands trembled as he lowered the camera. Martha's eyes widened when she saw his face go pale. "What did you see?" she asked. He looked up at her. His voice was barely a whisper. It's following me." Outside, the wind howled, rattling the olden windows. Somewhere, far in the distance, came the faint sound of a train whistle. But there hadn't been a train in Harrowdale for decades. Elias couldn't sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that photo again. The dark, human-shaped blur standing behind him, closer than it should have been. The faint curve of that unnatural smile burned into his mind. He tried to convince himself it was a trick of the light, fog, motion blur, anything. But deep down, he knew better. He felt something on those tracks. The way the air froze. The way the silence swallowed every sound. The way the shadow looked at him. He got up, pacing the small wooden room of the inn. The wind outside kept brushing against the window panes, whispering faintly, like distant voices carried on the breeze. The sound of the old building creaking didn't help either. When he finally sat on the edge of the bed, he noticed something strange. His camera, which he'd placed on the nightstand, was on. The screen was glowing faintly. It was showing the same photo again. He frowned, reaching for it. But before he touched it, the photo changed. The shadow wasn't behind him anymore. It was in front of him. And this time, it wasn't smiling. He dropped the camera, heart slamming against his ribs. The screen went black the moment it hit the floor. The room suddenly felt colder, the air thicker. He could see his own breath. Then a sound, a faint, rhythmic tapping, like footsteps, coming from the hallway outside his room. Tap, tap, tap. Elias froze. The sound stopped right outside his door. He slowly stood up, barely breathing. Then came another noise, the faint creak of the floorboards, as if someone was leaning against the other side. He reached for the doorknob, but stopped himself. The metal was freezing cold. He whispered under his breath, "No, no, it can't be." The door handle turned, just a fraction, then stopped. Elias backed away, eyes locked on it. His camera suddenly clicked again, even though it was still lying broken on the floor. The flash went off. For that brief second, the room lit up, and in the reflection of the window behind him, he saw it. The shadow, standing right behind him. He spun around, but nothing was there. Only the empty room, the wind howling outside, and the dim flicker of his bedside lamp. His heart thundered in his chest. That was it. He couldn't stay here. Whatever this thing was, it had followed him back from the tracks. He grabbed his bag, shoved his camera inside, and hurried downstairs. The old wooden steps creaked loudly under his boots. He didn't care if he woke the other guests. He just wanted out. But when he reached the lobby, he stopped dead in his tracks. The front door was open. Fog was rolling in through the doorway, thick and white, spilling across the wooden floor like smoke. And standing just beyond the threshold, barely visible through the mist, was a shape. Tall, still, watching. Elias. A voice called from behind him. It was Martha. She stood near the stairwell, holding a lantern, her robe wrapped tightly around her. He pointed at the door. "Do you see that?" he shouted. Martha's eyes widened when she looked. The lantern in her hand flickered violently. "Don't move," she whispered. The shape began to glide forward, not walking, not stepping, gliding. Its outline rippled, like smoke twisting in water. Martha ran to the desk and opened a small drawer. She pulled out an old silver cross and whispered something under her breath, words Elias couldn't quite hear. The flame of her lantern dimmed. The shadow stopped. For a moment, everything went still. Even the wind outside had gone quiet. Then, in a voice that sounded like it came from deep underground, the shadow spoke. "You shouldn't have come back to the tracks." Elias felt every muscle in his body freeze. The voice wasn't human. It was hollow, layered, like 100 whispers speaking together. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice trembling. The shadow tilted its head slightly, almost curious. "You saw me. Now you must see what I saw." Before either of them could move, the lantern burst, the glass shattering, flames snuffing out in an instant. The entire room was swallowed in darkness. Elias felt something cold wrap around his wrist. It was like touching ice, wet and heavy. He tried to pull away, but the grip tightened. The next moment, everything around him changed. The inn disappeared. The air filled with the screech of metal, the smell of burning wood, and the distant echo of screams. He was standing on the train tracks again. Only this time, it wasn't abandoned. The ground trembled beneath him. Headlights flashed through the fog. The sound of an approaching train roared louder and louder, a thunderous, metallic wail that pierced through his skull. Elias fell to his knees, covering his ears. He could see people, faint outlines of passengers, staring out from shattered train windows, their faces pale and terrified. Then he realized something horrifying. They weren't looking at the crash. They were looking at him. Elias couldn't move. The air was thick with smoke and the deafening roar of metal twisting against metal. Sparks rained down around him, lighting up the fog in brief flashes. The ground beneath him shook violently as the train screeched to a halt, pieces of debris flying in all directions. He covered his ears, but the sounds still found their way in. The cries, the grinding metal, the tearing of steel. Every scream was sharp, echoing deep inside his chest. Then, in a blink, the chaos stopped. The smoke thinned, the flames vanished, and silence fell again. Elias slowly stood up, trembling. The wreckage of the train was gone. The night was still once more. But he wasn't alone. A figure stood at the edge of the tracks, facing away from him, tall, wearing what looked like an old engineer's uniform. The man's shoulders slumped, his hands blackened with soot. Elias called out, "Hey, are you okay?" The man didn't respond. He just stood there, staring down at the rails. Elias took a cautious step closer. "I'm not here to hurt you. I just want to know what's happening." The man finally turned his head slightly, and in that moment, Elias felt the blood drain from his body. The man's face was half burned, the skin charred and cracked, one eye milky white. "You shouldn't have come here," the man rasped, his voice rough and hollow. Elias swallowed hard. "What is this place? What are you showing me?" The man turned fully now, his features flickering, one moment human, the next, nothing but shadow. "You're walking where we died," he said. "And the tracks, remember." Elias took a step back. "You were the engineer," he whispered. The figure nodded slowly. "I saw something that night, just before the crash. A shadow on the tracks. I tried to stop the train, but it was too late. The brakes failed. We went off the bridge." His voice trembled, distant and hollow. "They said I was mad, that I imagined it. But I saw it. I know what I saw." The ground trembled again, faintly this time, like a heartbeat pulsing beneath the rails. The air shimmered. Elias looked around, realizing the fog was shifting, forming faces. Dozens of them. Men, women, even children, pale and silent, their eyes hollow, their mouths open as if still mid-scream. The engineer looked up. "We can't leave. The shadow won't let us. It feeds on what we felt, the fear, the guilt. It keeps us here." Elias's voice cracked. "Then why me? Why am I seeing this?" The engineer's head tilted, that milky eye fixed on him. "Because you took its picture." Elias's heart stopped. "The photo?" The engineer nodded slowly. "The moment you captured it, it saw you. It followed the lens. It needed a way to escape the tracks." Elias stepped back, shaking his head. No, that's not possible." The man's form flickered again, the shadow creeping back across his body like spreading ink. "It is now," he said quietly, "and it's using you." Suddenly, a high-pitched screech echoed through the air, the sound of a train whistle, long and mournful. Elias looked down the tracks and saw a light, bright and blinding, racing toward him. The engineer looked at him one last time. "Run!" Elias turned and sprinted, the sound of the approaching train growing louder behind him. The ground shook, gravel scattering under his boots. He could feel the wind pushing against his back, hot and suffocating, as if something enormous was right behind him. He didn't dare look back. When he finally leapt off the tracks and fell into the wet grass beside them, the sound stopped. The air went still. The light vanished. He lay there, gasping, his chest burning, his mind reeling. When he looked up, the tracks were empty again, silent, unmoving. But something caught his eye. On the other side of the tracks, his camera was lying in the dirt. The lens was cracked, the screen faintly glowing. Elias crawled toward it, his hands shaking. He turned it over and saw a fresh photo had appeared, one he hadn't taken. In the image, he saw himself lying exactly where he was now. And behind him, reaching out, closer than ever, was the shadow. Elias dropped the camera, scrambling backward. But it was too late. A hand, dark, almost liquid in texture, shot out from the dirt beside the tracks and grabbed his ankle. He screamed, kicking, but the grip was too strong. It began pulling him toward the rails, inch by inch. The ground beneath him rippled like water, dragging him down. Then, through the fog, he heard a faint voice, Martha's voice. Elias, Elias, where are you? He tried to call back, but the sound that came out wasn't human. It was a strangled gasp, a sound swallowed by the mist. Martha appeared through the fog, her lantern glowing dimly. When she saw Elias being dragged toward the tracks, she shouted, "Let go of him," and ran forward, clutching the silver cross in her hand. The shadow hissed, a low, shrill sound that made the air vibrate. The ground trembled violently, and Martha fell to her knees. Elias reached toward her, his fingers just inches away. "Help me," he shouted. But before she could reach him, before their hands could touch, the ground beneath him collapsed. Elias was gone. Martha screamed, the echo of it carrying through the fog and fading into the night. When the mist finally cleared, the tracks were empty once again. Only his camera remained, lying half-buried in the gravel, its cracked screen still faintly glowing. The last photo it showed was the same one, Elias on the ground, the shadow behind him, and beneath it, in distorted letters, appeared a new line of text on the display. He walks the tracks now. The morning after Elias vanished, Harrowdale woke to thick fog blanketing the town. It was heavier than usual, clinging to the rooftops, seeping through alleyways, swallowing the narrow streets. Most people stayed indoors. The air felt wrong, like the world was holding its breath. Martha Greaves stood near the edge of the old railway path, lantern in hand. Her face was pale, her eyes sunken from a night without sleep. She had searched until dawn, but found nothing. No footprints, no signs of struggle. Only the cold silence of the abandoned tracks. Elias was gone. The only thing she found was his camera lying near the weeds. Its lens was cracked, and the battery long dead, but when she held it, it felt unnaturally cold. She took it back to the inn, placed it on the wooden counter, and just stared at it. There was a heaviness in the air, a pressure that made her chest tighten. She knew what it meant. He hadn't escaped. The shadow had claimed him. That evening, as the fog grew thicker again, Martha heard the faint sound of gravel shifting outside her window. She froze, listening. The rhythm of footsteps. Slow, uneven, dragging. She whispered to herself, "No, not again." Taking the lantern, she stepped outside. The road was empty, but the sound didn't stop. It was coming from down the hill where the old railway ran. The very place she had sworn never to return to. Her fear battled with something else, guilt. Elias had come to Harrowdale because of her town's secret, and now he was gone. She couldn't just hide. She needed to know what happened to him. So, with trembling hands, Martha followed the path through the fog, each step heavier than the last. When she reached the tracks, everything looked the same, silent, dead, endless. The fog drifted low across the rails, and the air smelled faintly of iron and rain. She raised her lantern, its weak glow barely cutting through the mist. That's when she saw it, a figure standing further down the line. Tall, still. At first, she thought it was the shadow again, but then she noticed the faint glint of a camera strap hanging around its neck. Her voice trembled. "Elias." The figure didn't move. She took a step closer. "Elias, is that you?" The figure tilted its head slowly, the motion eerily familiar. For a moment, the fog parted, and she saw his face. It was Elias, but not the man she'd met. His skin was pale, his eyes hollow, his clothes damp with dirt and moss. His mouth moved, but the voice that came out wasn't his. "You shouldn't have come here, Martha." Her breath caught in her throat. "Elias, please, it's me. You can fight it." He blinked slowly. The shadow doesn't fight. It remembers. She stepped closer, tears welling in her eyes. "I can help you. Just come with me, please." He raised his hand, pointing to the tracks beneath their feet. "It's too late. Once you see the truth, you can never leave." The fog began to twist violently around them, forming shapes, outlines of people, the victims of the crash, flickering in and out like fading memories. Their faces were twisted in pain, their voices blending into a single, haunting whisper. "We never left. We never left." Martha fell to her knees, covering her ears. "Stop. Please stop." Elias knelt beside her, his expression softening for just a moment, almost human again. "It wants to keep you here, too." She looked up, tears streaking down her face. "Then tell me how to stop it." He hesitated. The fog swirled faster. The ground beneath them trembled faintly. Then his voice, now barely his own, whispered, "Burn the tracks, and what's left, or it will find someone else, like it found me." The shadow behind him began to rise, taller than before, stretching across the mist like ink spilling over water. Its voice filled the air, deep and cold. "You can't burn memory. You can only join it." Martha clutched the lantern tightly, her fear replaced with defiance. "Then watch me try." She threw the lantern onto the tracks. The glass shattered, flames spilling across the wooden planks. The fire roared to life, spreading fast, the fog glowing orange. The shadow screamed, a sound so piercing it shook the air. The flames burned brighter, licking up through the mist, consuming the rails, the ties, even the ground itself. Elias reached out, his hand flickering between solid and shadow. "Go, Martha." But she didn't move. She stayed, watching as his face softened, his eyes clearing one last time. "Thank you," he whispered. Then the fire swallowed everything. When dawn came, the fog was gone. The air was clean for the first time in years. The tracks, the old cursed line of Harrowdale, were reduced to blackened ashes. Martha was found unconscious by the edge of the woods, her clothes singed but her heartbeat steady. She survived, barely, but Elias was never found. All that remained was his camera, lying near the burnt tracks. Inside it was a single, untouched photo. It showed the old railway burning, and in the corner, faint but visible, Elias standing in the flames, smiling. And that, my friends, is the story of the shadow on the old train tracks. They say the line was rebuilt years later, but trains still refuse to run on it. Every engine that passes near the site stalls without reason. Locals claim that on foggy nights, you can still hear the sound of footsteps on gravel, and sometimes, if you listen closely, a faint camera click echoing through the mist. If you ever find yourself near Harrowdale, don't follow the tracks. Because once the shadow sees you, it never forgets. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. Have you ever experienced something you couldn't explain, something eerie or supernatural? Tell me your story in the comments below, and maybe your tale will be the next one we bring to life. Stay safe, stay in the light, and remember, some shadows don't belong to us anymore.